Thank you for joining me to talk about this. So I mean, I guess it's not surprising that there's an overrepresentation of Indigenous youth in jails throughout this country, but what about this new report struck you?
It wasn't so much that it was new information, because we've actually been trying to raise the alarm on this rising incarceration rate for a really, really long time. So has the Office of the Correctional Investigator, so has the United Nations, but it doesn't really been picked up as the crisis that it is. So I think what's different about this report is that it really highlights some of the most glaring statistics, so that you know that overall youth corrections is going down, overall crime is going down, and overall that incarceration is going down, but not for Native people. In fact, it's skyrocketing across men, women, and children, and the fastest growing rate is for Indigenous girls. I mean, in one province, I think it was Saskatchewan, they're well over 90% of the intake is Indigenous girls, when we don't even make up 5% of the population nationally. So that's a problem.
So is there, we're committing more crimes, or is it that we are more likely to be put in jail for the crimes we commit, or is it a combination, or is it something different?
Yeah, so here's the thing. The Office of the Correctional Investigator long ago addressed this kind of myth that we're just more criminal. Inherently, by nature of our culture, we're more criminal. We know that is not the case, that this is a direct result of colonization, and not far off colonization, but the ongoing colonization. So, you've got the legacy of residential schools and 60s scoop, but you also have the current legacy of, poverty, dispossession, racism, and violence in our society, kids in foster care. And these are the underlying causes. But along with that is also the racially discriminatory, purposeful, and chronic underfunding of federal programs and services that the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal has said is the #1 reason why kids are in foster care. Well, if you look at the makeup of the kids that are going into corrections, more than 2/3 of them came from the foster care system. So Canada has created a pipeline direct from foster care into prison, also into human trafficking, into murdered and missing Indigenous women, into suicide, into sexual abuse. I mean, you name it. And the prospects are bleak when Canada's in control.
Well, and then so we fix it how? I mean, you're pointing at a pipeline, but that pipeline has a lot of subpipes going into that massive pipe. Where do you even start fixing?
Well, you have to cut off the flow. What's the #1 feeder group into youth corrections, for example? Foster care. We know foster care is a problem. What's the #1 feeder group to murdered and missing Indigenous girls? Foster care. So, okay, we've got a major problem. Let's deal with that. Let's stop taking kids away from their families. Let's keep them in their communities and their extended families. Let's recognize First Nation jurisdiction over their kids on and off reserve. But so you've got to stem the tide there. You've got to deal with racism in policing. Why are these kids being arrested for stealing chocolate bars anyway, when that would never happen to other kids in Canada? So we need to deal with the over arrests, the racism in policing, but then you also have to deal with, look at all the people that are in prison or in corrections right now. We have to engage in an aggressive form of decarceration for a large number of offenses that don't require separation from society. So if some kid goes in a joyride in a vehicle, that he or she does not pose a danger to himself or family, such that you need to remove them and put them into solitary confinement and literally give them a life sentence, because that's what a record is. It's a life sentence. It means you won't get a job. You won't be able to provide for your family, and you're probably going to have to commit more acts of crime to be able to provide for yourself.
So then we have the recidivism.
Exactly. So we need to stop that. We need to really decarcerate, especially women and children. I mean, the first thing Nelson Mandela did when he was out of prison and became in power in Africa was release all women in prison, all African women in prison who had kids under 12. Why? Because the best life chance for that woman is to be with their kids, and the best life chance for those kids is to be with their mama. Because we know statistically, if mom or dad go to prison, the kids are far more likely to go to prison. So in all the ways where there's pipelines feeding this, we have to stop it. And the government has to stop blatant racial discrimination, start funding health care and education and housing at normal levels, and really address our historic dispossession.
Well, and this is their own report, so I mean, I guess we'll see what they do with this. Thank you so much for discussing it with me.
Thank you.
I always value your opinion on matters. Thanks.
Thanks.